an original MCM production.
Welcome to Armed Forces Day at the Rotary Club of Milwaukee, where leaders make a difference. My name is Nancy Sennett, and I am the president of the club. We would now like to honor our members in the armed forces and our military guests. As I call your service, please stand to be recognized. I ask you all to hold your applause until we complete all of the recognition. The Navy Band Great Lakes Brass Quintet will play a few bars of each service song as I call your branch of the service. Those in the Army, please stand. The Marines. Those who are in or who have served in the Marines, please stand. And now those who have served or are in the Navy, please stand. And now those in the Air Force. And now the Coast Guard. Thank you all for your service. We're very pleased to have you all with us today. We will begin our formal program in 5 minutes while our parade of colors assembles. Please take this time to finish your introductions, grab your coffee, and I will be right back to continue the program. Thank you. parade the colors. Post the colors. And now I ask you to remain standing as I call on Linnea Katz-Pettit, the Executive Director of Revitalize Milwaukee, to lead us in our invocation today.
Thank you, President Nancy. I'd like you to bow your heads, please. Oh God, our Heavenly Father, we pray that you'll be with us at a time and guide our work. Grant us the wisdom to seek your will in all that we undertake, and the courage to follow the direction you will have us go in. In seeking to serve our God and country, may your efforts be benefit to all of fellow service members, men and women, veterans, and all people of our community. May we pray for peace. May we pray for all those who serve the public, that they may discharge their duties capably and with honor and dignity. May we pray for all that we enjoy an even-handed justice in our dealings, and that may we all know the blessings of the freedoms purchased for us at so great a cost. May we also, that we may also with loyalty serve this land in a true spirit of democracy. Oh my God. Bless this United States of America and grant that this nation may live in peace among the nations of the world. We also pray, O Lord, for our I can't speak today. It's not a good day. Comrades in the hospital or in the homes who are suffering from mental or physical illness or disability. Comfort them with a sense of your continuing presence, cheer them with a knowledge of your love, and grant them the blessings of health and happiness. All this we ask your name in the holy God. Amen.
Thank you. And you may all be seated. And now I'm most pleased to call upon Phil Volrath, Public Relations Consultant and Adjunct Professor at Marquette University, to introduce our speaker today. Phil?
Thank you very much. I have the privilege of introducing our speaker, Captain Amy Cocanour from the Milwaukee Coast Guard. I just wanted to mention a couple things. If you do want to reach her or contact her electronically, it's actually better to go to see her personally, because if you try to reach her electronically on your computer, it'll always come out Captain Coconut. And it's very difficult to try to get around that, but I just offer that as a suggestion. And then the second thing I'd just like to mention is that she's going to be retiring in about 2 weeks, so she won't be around here a great deal longer. And if you have, in the period of time between now and the period she retires, any citations or any fines or anything for voting, just put that fine in an envelope, say that you're a friend of mine, and drop it off at the Coast Guard station, and she'll take care of it. So, a great thing we've had. Amy currently serves as Commander, Coast Guard Sector Lake Michigan. As such, she leads 23 Coast Guard units with a force of over 500 active duty, 200 reserve, and 1,200 auxiliary personnel conducting search and rescue, law enforcement, aids to navigation, marine safety, and homeland security missions in the states of Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin. She graduated from the Coast Guard Academy in 1992 with a Bachelor of Science in Marine Science and earned a Master's of Marine Affairs from the University of Washington, in 1998. In 2006, Captain Cocanour headed to New Orleans, where she was the chief of the enforcement branch and managed emerging ports, waterways, and coastal security requirements and law enforcement operations there. From 2008 to 2011, she was the chief of response at Sector Hawaii, Honolulu, Hawaii, coordinating the response of pollution, search and rescue, and law enforcement incidents, including response to tsunamis, high visibility, homeland security missions, and oversight of facility safety, security, and container inspections. She's a Wisconsin native, and she's a 3-time Coast Guard Athlete of the Year and represented the U.S. Coast Guard, Navy, and all of the military at several international competitions and the Ironman Triathlon World Championship. Her personal awards include 2 Coast Guard Meritorious Service Medals, 3 Coast Guard Commendation Medals, 2 Coast Guard Achievement Medals, and 2 Coast Guard Letters of Commendation. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Captain Amy Cocanour.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you everybody for that really warm welcome. I really appreciate it. That's a really long bio. You could have stopped right after that first paragraph or so. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for having me this afternoon. I really appreciate very much being here. Thank you for all the service to your community as well. So thank you again. We really appreciate you hosting us, and thank you for really an incredible Armed Forces Week here in Wisconsin. You know, although I grew up here, I had no idea how much the people of Wisconsin embrace members of the military, and I've been so honored by everybody's generosity and just the outpouring of appreciation during this week. So today I thought I'd share a little bit with you about the Coast Guard's history, kind of then and now, and explain a little bit more about the Coast Guard, the 5th Armed Service, by the way, and Sector Lake Michigan's service to your community here. But they always say you ought to start with a good story. So I thought you might enjoy how a kid from Wisconsin ended up in the Coast Guard. So here goes. So it was my junior year in high school, and I was going to Homestead High School here right up the road, 1987. I was exploring kind of what I wanted to be when I grew up, right? I wanted to be Jacques Cousteau. I wanted to be a dolphin trainer. And Dad was not excited about this at all, right? So when I settled on studying oceanography, because really to me, Lake Michigan was kind of like the ocean, my research showed me that there were not a lot of universities that offered oceanography as an undergraduate degree. And my dad worked here in Milwaukee. He knew somebody who knew somebody whose sister had done all this research about who had oceanography, so he arranged for me to talk to her. And it turns out she was going to the Coast Guard Academy. So she came over and told me all about the place, and I was like, absolutely not. Sounds awful. Sounds horrible. So I wasn't sure exactly what the Coast Guard did, but I wasn't sure I wanted any part of the academy, that's for sure. So by the summer of 1987, after my junior year, we were on our regular sailing trip to Door County. We had a sailboat, and I was still really undecided and hadn't really saved any money for college. So Dad was still really hoping to avoid the dolphin trainer thing, repeatedly telling me I needed to find a real job. And he suggested a small diversion from our planned itinerary to pull into Coast Guard Station Plum Island so I could see a Coast Guard station and speak with the crew. So we navigated our way over to Plum Island with about 6 inches of water left under our keel. And we were greeted by a very surprised but friendly and welcoming crew of active duty reservists and auxiliary. And they proudly showed me their small station, their comms gear, probably the best that 1950s had to offer. You know, and told me about their life there at the station. And they were passionate. They were truly passionate about helping people, rescuing those in need, and enforcing boating laws, protecting the environment, and being really part of such a wonderful community. So I was pretty inspired by this crew, and despite some serious reservations about the whole military thing, I decided to apply for the academy in New London, Connecticut. So when I announced this to my grandfather, who, by the way, was a World War II Coast Guard first-class storekeeper, who, like most World War II vets, never really talked about his time in the service, he looked at me worriedly and said, "You don't need to do that, honey. We can find a way to send you to school." So in the summer of 1988, I left Wisconsin to join the Coast Guard, pretty sure I'd never have the opportunity to return. So little did I know that 25 years later, they'd have the last word on that. So the Coast Guard's official history began on the 4th of August in 1790 when the first Congress authorized the construction of 10 vessels to enforce federal tariff and trade laws to prevent smuggling. Known variously throughout the 19th century and early 20th centuries as the Revenue Marine and the Revenue Cutter Service, the Coast Guard expanded in size and responsibilities as our nation grew. So the service received its present name in 1915 when an act of Congress merged the Revenue Cutter Service with the Life-Saving Service, and that provided the nation with one single maritime service devoted to saving life at sea and enforcing the nation's maritime laws. So the Coast Guard began to maintain the country's aids to navigation, including the nation's lighthouses, when President Franklin Roosevelt ordered the transfer of the lighthouse service to the Coast Guard in 1939. In 1946, Congress permanently transferred the Commerce's Department of Bureau of Marine Inspection and Navigation to the Coast Guard, thereby placing merchant marine licensing and merchant vessel safety under our purview. So the Coast Guard is one of the oldest organizations in the federal government, and until Congress established the Navy Department in 1798, we served as the nation's only armed force afloat. Sorry, Navy. That makes us the oldest consecutive seagoing service. So the Coast Guard has really protected the nation throughout our long history and served proudly in every single one of the nation's conflicts. Our national defense responsibilities remain one of the most important ones that we have today. So since 2003, the Coast Guard has operated as part of the Department of Homeland Security, serving on the nation's front as the frontline agency for enforcing the nation's laws at sea, protecting the marine environment and our coastline and ports, and saving lives. Today's Coast Guard has about 42,000 men and women on active duty. We are the smallest of the armed forces, and we're a unique force that carries out an array of civil and military responsibilities, and we touch almost every facet of the U.S. maritime environment. So although we're a branch of the U.S. Armed Forces, since the time of our inception, we've been granted certain provisions and authorities that branches in the Department of Defense have not. So soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines are prevented from acting in law enforcement capacity by Title 18 of the U.S. Code, the Posse Comitatus Act, and by DoD policy. So Title 14 of the United States Code lays out the Coast Guard's law enforcement responsibilities. Our members may make inquiries, examinations, inspections, searches, seizures, and arrests upon the waters over which we have jurisdiction in order to prevent, detect, and suppress violations of laws. The Coast Guard's motto is Semper Paratus, means we're always ready. So being always ready, I'm prepared to pivot at this point. So instead of death by PowerPoint, which they did ask me if I had a PowerPoint. I know you guys love that as much as we do. DOD, you guys are really good at PowerPoint. We're not as good at that. So I thought you might enjoy some pictures and some narration with some music that talks all about the things that the Coast Guard does. So actually, if we can tee up the video, I got about 10 minutes so you don't have to listen to me talk for all 20 minutes.
Semper Paratus, always ready. For over 2 centuries, the U.S. Coast Guard has been the nation's first line of defense for maritime interest, in the heartland, in the ports, at seas, and around the globe. The Coast Guard is charged with protecting our maritime economy and environment, defending our maritime borders, and saving those in peril. Heads up! Time and time again, the Coast Guard has proven to be always ready for all hazards and all threats. The U.S. Coast Guard is America's maritime guardian. On an average day, the Coast Guard saves 13 lives, screens over 600 commercial vessels and 170,000 crew and passengers, responds to 64 search and rescue cases, and investigates 12 maritime accidents. The Coast Guard 9th District operates in an environment unique to anywhere else in the country. The Great Lakes are a seasonal, shared, saltless system that supply drinking water to millions and facilitate a billion-dollar regional economy. Sector Lake Michigan is a key member of the Coast Guard 9th District team. Sector Lake Michigan is responsible for over 1,600 miles of shoreline and 19,000 square miles of water, including a majority of Lake Michigan and numerous inland waterways. The area of responsibility also covers jurisdiction in 4 states: Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan. Sector Lake Michigan is responsible for all of the Coast Guard's 11 missions, which are mandated by law. These are ports, waterways, and coastal security, drug interdiction, aids to navigation, search and rescue, living marine resources, marine safety, defense readiness, migrant interdiction, marine environmental protection, ice operations, and other law enforcement. Sector Lake Michigan's missions change with the seasons. In the winter, ice rescue and ice breaking are vitally important to the region. The men and women responsible for executing the Coast Guard's missions throughout the Sector Lake Michigan area of operations consist of over 541 active duty and civilian personnel, over 208 reservists, and over 1,251 Coast Guard auxiliarists. The Sector Lake Michigan commander wears many hats. Their primary responsibility is port safety and security. They also ensure the safety of vessels and waterfront facilities and are responsible for the protection of navigable waters and the resources therein. The commander's specific responsibilities include Captain of the Port. As Captain of the Port, the sector commander is responsible for the safety of vessels and waterfront facilities and the protection of navigable waters and associated resources. Officer in charge of marine inspection. As OCMI, the sector commander is responsible for the inspection of over 500 vessels to ensure compliance with applicable laws, rules, and regulations. The sector commander leads marine casualty and accident investigations and initiates administrative action against credentialed mariners for negligent operations, violation of laws and regulations, misconduct, or incompetence. Federal On-Scene Coordinator. As FOSC, the sector commander directs and coordinates all effort at the scene of hazardous material release or oil discharge. Federal Maritime Security Coordinator. As FMSC, the sector commander directs the Area Maritime Security Committee and helps develop, maintain, coordinate, implement, and exercise the Area Maritime Security Plan. Search and Rescue Mission Coordinator. As the SMC, the sector commander oversees the prosecution of all search and rescue cases within the area. As a regional coordinator for security, Sector Lake Michigan maintains working partnerships with numerous city, county, and state law enforcement forces. The sector commander also serves as the regional liaison to federally recognized Native American tribes, maintaining an important and mutually beneficial relationship. Sector Lake Michigan is made up of 3 departments and 5 staff elements. The departments include Response Department, Prevention Department, and Logistics Department. The staff elements include Intelligence Staff, Contingency Planning and Force Readiness, Sector Command Center, Senior Reserve Officer, and the Command Master Chief. The Response Department is responsible for directing, overseeing, and providing risk assessment and operational support to all sector response units, including stations. Directing the execution of the following missions: search and rescue, marine safety, ports, waterways, and coastal security, illegal drug interdiction, undocumented migrant interdiction, other law enforcement, marine environmental response, and defense readiness operations to ensure sector unity of efforts. Conducting response planning and coordination with other federal, state, and local partners to jointly respond and mitigate the effects of maritime threats and vulnerabilities. The Prevention Department conducts activities that maintain a safe and secure maritime transportation system, save lives, and protect property and the environment. These activities include inspection of U.S. flag commercial vessels, ports, facilities, and containers, dangerous cargo handling, foreign flag vessel examinations, oversight of uninspected vessels, marine casualty investigation, waterways management, and navigation and boating safety. All efforts are focused on preventing casualties, mitigating consequences when casualties occur, and investigating and taking actions that prevent future casualties. The backbone of Sector Lake Michigan comes from the Logistics Department and its mission support elements. This includes personnel administration, supply chain management, food services, health services, and engineering, which is responsible for the routine and emergency maintenance of 40 vessels and over 25 facilities. These crucial missions keep our members safe, our assets at peak operational readiness, and all of our units well outfitted to serve the American public. The Contingency Planning and Force Readiness staff ensures sector components are thoroughly engaged in the preparedness cycle through the development and exercising of operational and contingency plans. It also houses a team of ready for operations evaluators who ensure the 16 stations are properly trained, qualified, certified, and outfitted for all of their operational missions on the water and the ice. And finally, CPFR is home to the Reserve Force Readiness staff, which coordinates reserve force preparedness, operational readiness, mobilization and demobilization of the sector reserve forces. The Sector Command Center is the tactical nerve center for the sector and directly coordinates the initial responses for all 11 of the Coast Guard's mission areas. It employs state-of-the-art technologies to ensure expanded maritime domain awareness and response capabilities. In order to execute its mission, Sector Lake Michigan has 16 small boat stations, 2 aids to navigation teams, 2 seasonal air facilities, 1 marine safety unit, 1 marine safety detachment, 1 sector field office, and over 50 members of our marine safety team, including vessel, port, and facility inspectors, marine casualty investigators, pollution responders, and waterway managers. The 16 multi-mission stations include Station Sturgeon Bay, Station Green Bay, Station Two Rivers, Station Sheboygan, Station Milwaukee, Station Kenosha, Station Wilmette Harbor, Station Calumet Harbor, Station Michigan City, Station St. Joseph, Station Holland, Station Grand Haven, Station Muskegon, Station Ludington, Station Manistee, and Station Frankfurt. During the busy summer season, the Coast Guard mans 2 additional stations in Chicago and Washington Island, bringing the total number up to 18. Each station is typically outfitted with a 45-foot response boat or a 47-foot motor lifeboat, plus additional 25-foot response boats. During the winter months, the boats are hauled out of the water and stations shift to ice operations. Station Sturgeon Bay has 2 specialized airboats for ice rescues, and the remainder of the stations use a small inflatable boat to assist ice rescue personnel. Each Coast Guard station has a senior enlisted member or chief warrant officer in charge and a crew ranging from 15 to 70 personnel. There are reserve components at 6 of the stations, and most have a dedicated crew of Coast Guard auxiliary volunteers who assist by monitoring the radios, preparing meals for the crew, and conducting boating safety patrols. The Sector Lake Michigan aids to navigation teams are in Two Rivers, Wisconsin, and Muskegon, Michigan. Each AIDS to Navigation team has a senior enlisted member acting as officer in charge and a crew of 11 personnel. These teams operate, establish, and maintain over 475 floating and fixed aids to navigation within the area. This includes 83 lighthouses across 4 states. Through strong leadership, highly trained personnel, superior equipment and structure, and state-of-the-art technology, Sector Lake Michigan diligently executes its duties and responsibilities as America's Maritime Guardian. United States Coast Guard Sector Lake Michigan is Semper Paratus, always ready.
At Sector Lake Michigan, we're always ready.
I hope that you learned a little bit more about all of the different missions that we do. And many of you might have been surprised to hear that we do a lot of those kind of things. But I'd like to just touch a little bit more on some of the missions and talk a little bit more about what you saw there. That are the oldest mission actually that we have is that AIDS to Navigation mission. Now, there's a lot of different debate about when the first light was established in the Great Lakes. There was a fire in 1920 that destroyed many of those records, but most historians agree that the first one was the Presque Isle Light in Lake Erie, which was built in 1819. And we know that there were over 100 lighthouses in 1920. So today, throughout all the Great Lakes, we have about 3,127 aids to navigation, and that includes lighthouses as well. So we have a lot of advancements in technology. We've got more efficient lamp technology, radio control, and navigation systems like GPS. And the amount of navigation and types of aids might decrease, but it'll never eliminate the need for ATON. So our crews in Two Rivers and Muskegon, as you saw, they work nonstop throughout the year. They put them all in the water in the spring. They keep them running during the summer season and then remove them all in the fall. So it's a pretty big job. The second one that you heard about was the Ports and Waterways and Coastal Security. So that kind of grabbed the headlines, obviously, after 9/11 and with the subsequent passing of the Marine Transportation Security Act and the Safe Port Act. So the Coast Guard, we shifted a lot of focus towards providing visible deterrence to those bad guys and also a great deal of less obvious strategies to hardening different targets around the port. So, but that's really not new. President Wilson signed the Espionage Act of 1917, and that shifted port security from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to the Coast Guard. You see how this works, right? Anytime there's a disaster, we get another mission. So this actually created the position of captain of the port, which is one of my titles, and it basically is almost unlimited authority for the Coast Guard to direct the movement of vessels and people on the water and actually on the waterfront for waterside security. So there are originally 4 captains of the port and some in pretty obvious strategic places like New York, Philly, and Norfolk, but the 4th was actually established in Sault Ste. Marie. So that kind of shows you how important the Great Lakes have been. So today there's about 40 captain of the port zones, and like I said, I have the honor of holding this responsibility. So we conduct thousands of security patrols and spot checks throughout Sector Lake Michigan, both from the air, the water, shoreside every year. And we know that some of them have actually paid off, not only with security concerns, criminal type activities, or just unsafe operations. And last year we actually investigated 45 reported security incidents just last year. So the third one that you saw up there was drug interdiction. The Coast Guard is actually the lead federal agency for maritime drug interdiction, and we share that lead responsibility for air interdiction with Customs and Border Protection. So our job is to reduce the amount of drugs coming into the United States. But it's not really a new mission. Again, in the 1870s, Chinese migrants were smuggling opium in merchant ships, cargoes, and baggage. But smugglers have become more sophisticated, and so have we. We regularly operate in the deep Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific. Our larger cutters are equipped with better communications, helicopters, and small boats. They can operate over the horizon with the capability to shoot out engines, and fixed-wing aircraft patrolling the skies supplies with better radar systems to detect those boats. So 2016 was actually a record-breaking year for the Coast Guard in our fight against drug trafficking. By the end of October alone, we had seized over 416,000 pounds of cocaine valued at $5.6 billion, and 585 smugglers were apprehended. So through technology and intelligence sharing amongst all the different agencies, we have knowledge of about 80% of the drugs coming to our shores, but unfortunately, the Coast Guard only remains we're resource constrained, like a lot of agencies are, and can only act on about 20% of what we know. So we continue to work with Congress to recapitalize our offshore fleet and to try to close this gap. So this kind of brings me to an interesting chapter in Coast Guard history on the lakes. In the 1920s, the Coast Guard Congress tasked the Coast Guard with enforcing the 18th Amendment, prohibition. So on one hand, this was a great thing for the Coast Guard. It put us in the spotlight for the first time. It was our biggest injection of personnel and ships in our entire history. In fact, the Navy gave us more than 20 World War I era destroyers and minesweepers to help us with our battle with the rum runners. On the other hand, we really didn't make a lot of friends. So the supporters of prohibition expressed a lot of frustration when we didn't stop the flow of booze, and those against prohibition were angry at the Coast Guard for denying them of their evening cocktails. So history abounds with the great stories of running gun battles, and more than one rum runner lies on the bottom of the Great Lakes. The fourth mission of ours that we talked a little bit about was migrant interdiction. So migrant interdiction, that mission was very much in the public eye back in 1980 during the Mariel boat lift, if you remember that. That was when approximately 124,000 undocumented Cuban migrants tried to gain access into the United States. But it wasn't really the first time that was on the Coast Guard's plate. So shortly after the Coast Guard was founded and called the Revenue Cutter Service, Congress declared that no American citizen may carry slaves from one U.S. nation or between foreign nations. And the Revenue Cutter, Governor Jay, seized a vessel in 1799 for attempting to transport slaves back to Cuba. So back in my own career, back in the early 1990s, I was on the Coast Guard cutter Dependable, where we interdicted thousands of Haitian migrants bound for the U.S. on unseaworthy and overloaded boats. That operation actually continues today. So it's as much about illegal immigration as it is about humanitarian mission, because I saw firsthand what can happen. Here at Sector Lake Michigan, we don't have a border with Canada, but we still pursue those missions when we come across it in our other things that we're doing. Living marine resources, we didn't touch on it too much in there, but we're charged with protecting the American exclusive economic zone, and we enforce treaties on fishing and other and fisheries enforcement laws. And I want to touch a little bit on marine safety. So the last of the four predecessor agencies to join the Coast Guard was actually the Steamboat Inspection Service. And in the early years of steamboat development, inland waterways were actually better suited to new vessels than ocean navigation. So that organization by 1911 would list as their duties, and we have these today: the inspection of vessel construction and equipment, the examination and licensing of marine officers, the examinations of seamen and investigation of marine casualties and violations of inspection laws, establishing regulations to prevent collisions, and establishing regulations for transporting all passengers and merchandise. Yes, we still have all of those things. So ships over 300 gross tons, and those carrying more than 6 paying passengers, they need to have a Coast Guard certificate of inspection issued by the Coast Guard. It's a pretty big deal, inspecting more than just fire extinguishers and a few things. It keeps my crews very busy, as you saw up in Sturgeon Bay. So we also investigate accidents involving commercial vessels. And this is kind of also the mission where you might see us most often, is in our recreational boating safety. So if you're ever out here on the water, and I said we can conduct searches and inspections upon the water, this is where we will come over to you and ask to see your fire extinguishers and flares. So, and our volunteers with the Coast Guard Auxiliary, we have a few of those in the audience today. They actually help us perform a lot of those types of inspections and ensure that recreational boaters are safe. And this past year, we also saw hundreds of marine events as well. So you might see us out here enforcing the safety zone for the upcoming Air and Water Show. And we conduct many other missions as well, as pollution response and ice operations, as you saw on the video. But the one that obviously we're most known for is search and rescue. So, and that's that's really all of those missions. These are the things of which and why we truly serve. Not all cases, unfortunately, with search and rescue, and happily, the hardest job I have to do is to tell the next of kin that their loved ones have been lost. All too often, these boating and swimming fatalities are really preventable. We work a lot with the DNR, the police, the fires, cities to get the word out. So public service announcement, Safe Boating Week is coming up this next week. So here are some of those talking points. Wear your life jackets, wear them right. Know the dangers of riptides, and by the way, we do have riptides in the Great Lakes. We push all of these messages out. Anytime I get up on a soapbox like I'm doing right now, we try to get these messages out. The Great Lakes are beautiful, but they truly can be deadly. And these are just kind of a few things that we do each and every day throughout Lake Michigan. So, it's true that we had old lifeboats, and we evolved from a gang of youngsters going through the surf to the cutting edge 45-foot response boat that you see up there. We had slow flying machines to now we have MH65s and 60s. And we've really changed the way that we can prosecute search and rescue. But so much has not and never will change, and we're always going to rely on the mariners' prudent stewardship and seamanship to steer clear of shoal waters. But when the unexpected happens, when those famous gales of November come, the men and women of the Coast Guard are always going to be here to respond. It's our honor to serve you, to ensure your safety and security, and be part of your community. So I began my tour here in June of 2014. And as Phil mentioned, it's really with great sadness that I leave in the middle of July. It's truly not 2 weeks. I got 2 months. So I've come full circle. I've come back to the community where I grew up and with the opportunity to serve. So I want to thank you for all of your efforts, because I know some of the things that you do, and that one of your missions is to support the military. So I can't thank you enough for that. And the Coast Guard here at Sector Lake Michigan is very proud to serve you. So thank you very much. Questions, right? Oh my gosh. I guess I could take, yes, sir.
So I'm a Lake Michigan sailor, nearshore and offshore. What's the average response time to a mayday? And how long can a person survive in the water before hypothermia sets in?
Good question. So we need to be there within 30 minutes. And how long somebody can survive is very dependent on environmental conditions. So actually there are these great formulas, and people actually subjected themselves to tests in very cold water to determine how long somebody can survive or how long they can move in cold water. This morning, I think we call it functional time and survivable time. So the water temperature was, I think, around 49 degrees. Survival time was around, I think, 11 hours, but that's based on a general body type and how fit you are and whether or not you have a life jacket on and all of those kind of good things. So it just depends. It's been a cold, obviously we've had kind of a nice start to the year, but the water is still very cold. And unfortunately we've had several deaths, and usually they are paddle sport enthusiasts, kayakers and others that are not wearing life jackets and don't think about the fact that even though the air temperature might be around 70, or I think it's supposed to reach like 80 today, that the water temperature is still in the 40s. So that can be a real challenge for us. Thank you for your question. Yes, sir.
Where are you going in 2 months?
Where am I going in 2 months? So my husband is in the Air Force. He is stationed in Florida. So we've lived together about 4 out of the 16 years we've been married. So I think I'm going to go visit him more often, but why rush? Why rush? So yeah, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to do a lot of volunteering, and maybe I'll look for a Rotary club to join, because that seems like a great opportunity to do some volunteer work. Yes, sir.
Captain, a couple of years ago, there was a little controversy on Lake Michigan when the Coast Guard wanted to do firing range practice out on the lake, and the pleasure and power boaters thought that might not be a real safe thing to do. And as I remember, the Coast Guard elected not to do firing range practice on Lake Michigan. Where do you get your on-water practice?
We generally do not do on-water practice. We do it on shore, where we can collect the brass. I guess. Commander Pape, you want to make any more comments on that? Nothing? Okay. It's my lawyer in the audience, by the way. So yes, so we do not. Actually, when my previous unit before this was at Camp Lejeune in North Carolina, where we trained our tactical shooters and tactical bow gunners and things like that, and we would use a lot of blanks and things like that. So we weren't putting live rounds, or we weren't putting brass or anything like that, or rounds into the water. Sir?
A long time ago, I bought a map that showed all of the accidents and fatalities, and there were some places that there were incredible numbers. What has made the lake so much safer than it used to be?
What is? Well, I don't know the map that you're actually referring to. However, I think over the years, hopefully, that means that we're getting out our message for recreational boaters on trying to be more, being more safe out there, wearing your life jacket and things like that, and kind of a lot of those other missions I talked about, where there are accidents, there have been regulations imposed on commercial boaters as well, or commercial Lakers and all of those other kind of larger vessels and foreign vessels that come in. So I think as technology has evolved, I'd like to think that people are getting smarter and maybe might take a look at the weather before they go out. I'm not sure, but luckily we do investigate a lot of accidents, as I mentioned, and fatalities on the lake, and most of the fatalities that we are having are usually as the result of, unfortunately, the paddle sport industry. Like I said, as earlier this season, it was mostly kayakers and other folks like that haven't survived the cold water at the start of this season. And
so what's the responsibility for the river as a rower? Right?
That's because I file a float plan before I go out rowing. No, just kidding. So a federally navigable waterway, of which the Milwaukee River is a federally navigable waterway. So as you can tell, we regulate a lot of the passenger vessels and other things that are on there. So that's why you'll see us cruising up and down the river, making sure that everybody is safe, and possibly doing some boardings and making sure people are wearing their life jackets, that kind of thing. So, yes, sir.
In the film, I noticed some of your Coast Guard people with dogs. What do they use the dogs for?
Drug detection. We don't actually have I do not have any dogs here, although I would love some, but we don't have any here. They use them at a lot of our marine safety and security teams and things like that for safety and explosive detection and things like that. So a lot of times if we do any kind of enforcement operation with dogs, we will partner with some of our other response agencies to use dogs. Sir. Yes, sir.
Speaking of money and budgets, how are you faring with the defense budget, and how are you funded for this upcoming cycle?
Actually, our budget does not fall under Department of Defense. As I mentioned, we're part of Department of Homeland Security, and that is still ongoing. I'm hopeful that we'll get it. I mean, we do a lot of things, so hopefully we're gonna do really well with that. But we're doing fine right now. We definitely get the mission accomplished, and I know the commandant and others have some strategic things that they're looking towards, like as I mentioned, trying to recapitalize our offshore fleet. And something I didn't really get into, one of the things that we do is ice breaking. And as you notice, that whole global warming thing that's going on, right? The Arctic is opening up. And they're starting to have, cruise ships go up there. They're having folks are going in there and looking for additional resources and things like that. So unfortunately, we have only one heavy icebreaker that is working right now. So right now our commandant is really trying to make sure that we can get more of that capability, because as the Arctic opens up, there's going to be a need for more presence up there, especially, if a cruise ship or somebody gets into trouble up there, there's going there to save them is going to be a real challenge. Yes, sir.
I wasn't clear about your answer to the earlier question on response times to a distress call. Well, what are they for air and by water, and does that cover all of Lake Michigan?
It does. So per national policy, we have to be underway within 30 minutes and on scene within 2 hours. Both. Correct. Tom?
I noticed that when I'm on the river in the summer, there's a county sheriff's boat, there's a police boat, there's a fire boat, there are posties, probably 6 other people who like to paint their boats up and look official. What is the purpose, and how's that all coordinated, or is it?
It is. We do coordinate with our local response partners because we can't be everywhere all the time. We have 2 boats here. I have 1 crew on at any given time. So we kind of coordinate in case, when we have marine events or anything like that. If we're working one corner, they might be working the other corner, because we can't do it all with just who we have, because I can have 1 boat out with 1 crew at any given time, particularly like here in Milwaukee. So, and we enforce federal laws, and the locals and state will enforce, state and local laws. So that's kind of why you might see a variety of us out. They're looking for different things. Yes, sir.
I think I understood that you have done the Iron Person exercise a few times. Would you recommend that all Rotarians participate? Including me in the Iron Person?
I think you should. I think it's something we should all aspire to. So I'll finish it off with one story. I thought I'd give my Baywatch story here, right? Some of you have heard this before. So I've had the opportunity, as I mentioned in my bio, was to represent the Coast Guard and the U.S. military at a lot of different events, like in Europe and a few different places. So it's pretty cool. When I made the U.S. team during opening ceremonies, we were all wearing whatever uniform we are. And there were Navy folks on the team and Army folks and everything else. So we were going to opening ceremonies, and it was in Belgium. It was 1997. And I was wearing this uniform, as a matter of fact. And so this Romanian general came up to me, and he was part of the Romanian delegation. And he looks at me, and he looks at my ribbon rack, and he's like, "Are you a war hero?" And I said, no, I'm not a war hero. I said, I'm in the Coast Guard. And he goes, Coast Guard. He goes, oh, Baywatch. So that's, we do so many different things, and we have so many important missions, and yet we go across the globe, and I'm in the Coast Guard, and they remember Baywatch. So anyways, hopefully you remember me for more than that. But thank you very much. Thank you very much for serving your community and for allowing us to serve you. So have a great afternoon.
An MCM production.